Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something, well, pretty different. The Cult of Brighter Days.
Yeah, definitely unique.
We've got some of their internal documents, and our goal here is to really get into two key things. Their humor, which seems quite specific, maybe even dark, and this concept they call Abiscoridism.
That whole cult not a cult, joke not a joke thing.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
It's intriguing. So, okay, let's start at the beginning. Where did all this come from?
Well, looking through these documents, it's clear it wasn't, some big planned thing from the start.
Oh.
It actually started much smaller, more personal. Back in 2002, the founder, Michael Dorland, he was using it to cope with some really heavy personal stuff.
Like what kind of stuff?
Existential dread, fear of hell, even suicidal thoughts, really dark places. And he used gallows humor, as a way to deal with it.
Just for himself, initially.
Pretty much, yeah. It wasn't until much later, 2022, when Pope Richard got involved, that it started becoming more like a structured philosophy.
Ah, okay.
But even before that, some core ideas were already kind of kicking around, like the 5 tenets, and especially this principle, failure is mandatory.
Failure is mandatory. That one definitely catches the eye.
It does. It shows these ideas, especially the one, have been important for a long time, even before it was a formal thing.
It's so counterintuitive, isn't it? Society tells us failure is bad, avoid it at all costs.
Exactly. But for them, it seems built in.
Let's really focus on the humor aspect for a minute. You said gallows humor, born from these intense personal struggles. How does that specific type of humor still, influence them today and their philosophy, their community interactions?
It seems like that initial personal coping mechanism really set the stage. It evolved into this broader, deliberate use of humor as a tool for the whole community.
So it's not just random jokes.
Not at all. Tenet number 3 is really central here. It says, if you can't be nice, be funny without punching down.
Okay, without punching down. That sounds important.
It's crucial. The documents really stress this. It's an ethical guideline, basically. Humor should be aimed upwards at power, at systems, absurdity itself. Self-deprecation is fine, too.
But not downwards.
Absolutely not. They're very explicit about prohibiting mocking vulnerable groups. That's a hard line for them.
So it's structured humor, then, not just like a free-for-all where anything goes if it gets a laugh. They have examples of how this works in practice, right?
Yep.
In their communities.
They do. Like, on their Discord server, they talk about using absurdist reframing.
Absurdist reframing.
Yeah, looking at things from a completely different, often funny perspective. They critique systems using humor, make fun of themselves, and they use tone indicators.
Like a J and S.
Exactly.
Okay.
J for joke, S for sarcasm. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page, especially online where tone gets lost.
That makes sense. What about other spaces, like their gaming servers?
Similar idea. The guidelines mention playful absurdity, funny rituals. Sometimes members will deliberately make themselves the butt of the joke. It's all part of that don't punch down ethos.
Interesting how it permeates different areas. What about face-to-face? In-person events, how does it work there?
Well, the guidelines mention things like situational humor, safe inside jokes, callbacks everyone gets, and even physical comedy. But the key is it shouldn't mock anyone's physical characteristics or disabilities.
Right.
Even political humor is meant to focus on systems, not individuals, and definitely not vulnerable groups.
And they even have, formal documents for this. Forms.
Yeah, it sounds a bit bureaucratic, but things like Form 42P, the political writing framework, or Form 87C, philosophical compliance assessment.
Yeah.
It shows they're thinking about it quite seriously. How to make sure their humor stays aligned with that punching up principle, always considering the perspective of those with less power or privilege.
It sounds surprisingly rigorous.
Where?
Humor. But I guess it tracks back to those origins, doesn't it? Using it to deal with serious stuff.
Exactly, and it still serves that deeper purpose. It's a coping mechanism, yeah, but also something more.
More how?
In facing big, scary things, existential dread, climate change, late-stage capitalism, you name it, they frame humor as communal joy, as resistance.
Communal joy as resistance.
I like that. That example they give scheduling the apocalypse between brunch and therapy, it perfectly captures it, doesn't it? Dark humor, yes, but also a refusal to just give in to despair. It's quite powerful.
That's a fantastic image, actually. Dark, but insightful. And this focus on humor even affects how they handle moderation within the community.
It seems so. Their guidelines mention something called humor redirection.
humor redirection.
Yeah, apparently it's a step they try before just silencing someone, like guiding the humor back towards their principles instead of just shutting it down.
So trying to be constructive about it.
Exactly. More about teaching and guiding the use of humor, less about just policing it.
Okay, so humor is clearly fundamental, intentional, ethical, woven right into their fabric. Let's switch gears a bit to this other core idea, Abiscoridism.
Right. The paradox.
This description, simultaneously a cult and not a cult about a joke that isn't a joke.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack. What's the thinking behind that, philosophically?
This is where it gets really fascinating. They call this paradoxical positioning, and it underpins Abiscoridism. It's a core principle.
And he draws on other philosophies.
Yes, the documents mention a few. Discordianism is one.
Discordianism, like embracing chaos.
Sort of, yeah. It playfully embraces chaos and paradox, rejects rigid order. Think of the golden apple causing trouble versus the dull lemon of forced conformity. They like that tension.
Yep.
They also connect it to absurdism. You know, acknowledging life might be inherently meaningless, but choosing to create meaning anyway, that's a paradox right there.
Finding meaning in meaninglessness.
Precisely. And fundamentally, they talk about rejecting binary thinking. Things aren't always either. They prefer to think of things in a kind of quantum superposition. Multiple states at once.
So it's about holding conflicting ideas together, not needing one single answer, embracing the both hand.
That's a great way to put it. And you see this pop up everywhere in how they describe themselves.
Like how?
Like being a religious community, but without dogma beyond those basic tenets. Or a philosophical movement without claiming absolute truth. A social group without a strict hierarchy. It's this deliberate embrace of contradiction that really seems to define their whole approach.
They seem to be actively messing with traditional labels. You mentioned their character trinity. Alice, George, and Pixel relates to this.
Yeah, it's a neat personification. Alice, or the dull lemon, represents order. George, the golden apple, represents chaos. Pretty standard dichotomy.
Right, order versus chaos.
But then there's Pixel. Pixel represents quantum uncertainty.
Quantum uncertainty.
Yeah, Pixel kind of transcends that simple order-chaos split through what they call quantum indifference. It's not about picking a side, but recognizing this fundamental uncertainty that exists beyond those easy binaries. It models the paradoxical thinking.
And again, they're formal about this. I saw a note about Form 47P, paradoxical implication analysis.
Exactly. The fact that form even exists tells you they're not just accidentally paradoxical. They're actively thinking about it, analyzing it.
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Precisely. They seem to see it as a core strength, something that allows for both the humor and the serious philosophy to coexist and actually, stimulate thought and discussion. It challenges assumptions.
So pulling it all together, it really feels like this Cult of Brighter Days has created this unique space where humor-specific, dark, ethically guided humor isn't just tacked on.
No, it's fundamental.
It's woven right into their philosophy and their interactions. And this Abiscoridism, this paradoxical positioning, lets them be both deeply philosophical and seriously playful at the same time.
Yeah, it's a deliberate contradiction, like you said, and it seems to be what fuels a lot of their energy, both intellectually and as a community.
It's quite something. When you first hear cult and gallows humor, you might expect one thing.
Right, but the documents show something much more nuanced and intentional. They started using humor to face the really dark stuff, personally. And that origin story just keeps echoing through everything they do now.
It's a powerful through line.
It really is. A surprising but coherent blend.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About the role humor can play in navigating complexity, even absurdity in our own lives. Maybe embracing a bit of paradox and some well-aimed humor. Maybe that offers new ways to look at things.
It's definitely food for thought.
Perhaps something for our listeners to chew on until our next deep dive. Thanks for walking us through this today.
My pleasure. It was fascinating stuff.